growth outlook, such as geopolitical tensions, are significant. Bajaj Housing Finance sets IPO price band at 66 to 70 rupees per share. The price band implies a valuation of 3.7 times price to book. Issue opens on the 9th of September. Bajaj Financial Services Chairman Sanjeev Bajaj says he does not feel that a banking license is essential to grow further. Points out that existing licenses are sufficient for the growth planned at the group's lending businesses. A bonanza listing for Premier Energies as it debuts at 120% premium over the IPO price. Countries tighten visa rules for students to control migration. We get you details on how this could impact Indian students aiming to get an international education. Nitin Gadkari slams companies that make roads and tunnels in hilly areas, says the 3,500 crore rupee road between Manali and Kullu was wiped out due to rains and landslides. Calls makers of the Details project reports the culprits because they are prepared sitting at home. West Bengal Assembly passes a state anti-rape bill. The draft legislation seeks capital punishment for persons convicted of rape if their actions result in the victim's death or leave her in vegetative state. Netflix India assures the government that in the future, content will be made in accordance with the nation's sentiments, sources say. This comes on back of a row involving its web series IC-814 Kandahar Hijack. Hello and welcome. You're watching Profit 360 on NDTV Profit, and I'm your host, Mallika Mishra. Over the next half an hour, we'll bring you the latest on markets along with national and international news. Now let's have a look at how the markets have fared today. Nifty ended flat with Nifty Media as a top laggard. I'm joined by Harsh Sayatha to give us a detailed breakdown. Harsh, over to you.
Well, we've closed flat where the index is concerned, and let's quickly pull up the Nifty. Absolutely flat as it can get. Let's quickly pull up the intraday chart. See the kind of band the Nifty was trading in. Actually, that's the real point I'm trying to make. Just about 80 to 90 point band is what we've traded in pretty much through the day. And we clocked the intraday high right at the start. So we've fallen off post that. That's how at least the Nifty shaped up. Let's pull up the contributors first before I go on to individual names and the heat map. Well, in terms of Nifty contributories, you had ICICI Bank do fairly well. So some private sector banks did fairly well, and life insurers stood out, especially in the last hour or so of trade. Infi, RIL, some of the heavyweights packing a punch on the other side. Bajaj Finance down, some profit booking, it seems, after that Bajaj Housing Finance IPO, especially on the pricing of the IPO came out, 66 to 70 rupees a share, 3.7 times price to book. But let's quickly pull up the heat map. There you go. You're seeing SBI Life, HDFC Life lead the pack. So financials, essentially, that's what ruled the roost. Along with two-wheelers, Hero Moto, Titan also did fairly well in trade. Among the losers, you'll see ONGC, Infi, and a clutch of stocks, in fact. No specific counters with big gains or losses. But nonetheless, you had quite a few stocks which were in the red by just about 1% or thereabouts. Let's pull up the broader market, see what happened in the Nifty mid-cap and small-cap. The Nifty mid-cap largely was in line with the benchmark, and that's what you'll see on your screen. 0.25% higher. We clocked the day's low just about very close to close, and that's probably reflecting on the index. But the Nifty small cap is where the outperformance was, around 0.6% higher. And if we can have the breadth of the market, the advanced decline reflects that largely we had a 1:1 at close, even though the market breadth was fairly strong at the start of the day. Let's also try and look in at the sectoral heat map, the indices which have buzzed in trade. The Nifty Bank up 0.5%. So that was the one which was supporting the Nifty 50 throughout the day of trade today. But you look at some of the big losers in trade. You'll see Realty Metal, not on the Nifty, but nonetheless, those two were the two top losers outside of media and energy. And you also saw some bit of pain in FMCG and IT, 0.33% lower on the IT, especially on the benchmark. That one would have definitely had an impact. In terms of gainers, you saw good traction in Nifty Pharma, pretty much through the day outside of private banks. So that's how it played out. Let's pull up the BSE 500, see how that one has shaped up. No major big losers, 3.5% on a Z, a few losers in the 2 to 3% kind of bracket. But look at the gainers. JM Financial, Bombay Burma, Godrej Industries, some big gainers. But again, just about quite a few. After that, you had all the defense counters buzzing, along with Mazagon Dock up 6%, along with HAL as well. And some of those were also buzzing in trade. You had a Raymond up 5% odd. So that's how we shaped up for the day.
Slowing credit growth has prompted a lot of investors to move away from financials. But what makes Vetri Subramaniam of UTI AMC comfortable with valuations of this space? Listen in.
Nominal GDP growth is currently below 10% in the economy. So in the context of nominal growth being below 10%, a 13 to 14% credit growth is quite comfortable. Remember, RBI itself has been, sort of tackling some parts of the economy or some segments of lending where it had been growing very rapidly. They've actually tried to get people to pull back on that. So there is both an impact of slightly slower growth in the economy as well as actions by RBI which are causing this credit growth to come in slower than where it was a year ago. But I don't see that as anything more than cyclical. And I would actually submit that if credit growth were to turn down significantly, we would have a lot more to worry about, because that would be an indicator of significantly slower growth.
Now, the World Bank has upgraded India's growth forecast for FY25 to 7% as compared to the earlier 6.6%. To tell us more about the upgrade and the reasoning provided, Pallavi joins in. Pallavi, what does this mean for India?
Right. So like you've mentioned, the World Bank now projects India's GDP growth at 7%. That's compared to its previous estimate of 6.6%. And this, it says, is despite a fairly subdued external environment. External risks, in fact, continue to remain significant. Geopolitical tensions can also possibly put some pressure on commodity prices and critical supply chains, and resurgent interest rates could in fact continue to mean higher for longer interest rates. Broadly, the higher inflation trajectory that we're seeing globally could continue to pose risks to India's domestic outlook as well. However, it does say that despite all of these external risks, India's growth remains resilient, not just for FY25, but also for the medium term. The significant expansion that we have seen in public capex in recent years is expected to eventually help crowd in private investments. The fact that domestically we are seeing inflation on an easing trajectory, as well as the fact that recovery is being seen in agriculture given the trajectory of the southwest monsoons. All of this is expected to help growth, and all of this is also expected to help reduce extreme and moderate poverty. That's according to the World Bank. Overall fiscal deficit also is expected to continue to fall and is also expected to help pull down public debt over the medium term. But what was also interesting in the World Bank's commentary was what it had to say on India's exports. It does feel that the Indian economy needs to also pump up its exports. It needs to diversify its exports, integrate better into global value chains. India's current trade policy stance features both liberalizing measures but also slightly restrictive measures. Of late, we have seen a spate of tariff as well as non-tariff barriers that are possibly restricting India's trade openness. It will need to lower trade barriers, revisit FTAs and regional integration options. That's according to the World Bank.
Well, thank you for that, Pallavi. Now let's listen into World Bank's Country Director of India, Auguste Tano's insights on why India should expand its export basket.
We think the time has come from India to expand its export basket into other areas, including areas where India was doing very well in the past but not doing so great now, such as textile, apparel, and maybe new goods such as green technology goods that are coming up as a potential area for growth, for export growth. So to achieve that kind of diversification, there is a need for India to connect to global value chains, in these new areas more proactively. And there are new export markets that are also emerging. For example, if you look at global growth today, a good share of global growth is coming from the middle-income countries and low-income countries, generally called the Global South. And this is an untapped market for export. India could export a lot more to the Global South. And by doing that, India will export goods that are perhaps not so high-tech, but they will need a lot of workers to produce those goods. And therefore, India's trade will become increasingly more job-creating.
Well, now it's time for some action from the primary market. The IPO of Bajaj Finance, Housing Finance, will now open for subscription next week at a price band of 66 to 70 rupees. Now, Bajaj Finance subsidiary is looking to raise over 6,500 crore through the offering. Harsh brings us more details on the valuations and more. Harsh, over to you.
Well, 6,560 crore is what Bajaj Housing is set to raise, of which 3,000 crore will go straight to the holding company, Bajaj Finance. 3,560 crore is what the fresh issue is going to look like. It's already well capitalized, 23.5% plus in terms of capital adequacy. But really, what's standing out for me in Bajaj Finance? First off, with regard to growth, last 7 years, the company has done nearly 70+% in terms of compounded annual growth on its AUM. Almost 140% compounded annual growth on the profit after tax. Mind you, this is on the back of Bajaj Finance, which has compounded investor wealth at a stupendous pace. 900x over the last 20 years nearly is what Bajaj Finance has done. So it's been a phenomenal compounder for all investors within the Bajaj Finance fold. But let's quickly switch focus. Asset quality will be the key concern on investor radar, especially where Bajaj Housing is concerned. And you're looking at very, very solid asset quality. You're looking at a roughly 0.28% in terms of GNPA, 0.1% in terms of NNPA, and therefore asset quality not that much of a concern. It's a 2.4% ROA business, and it's valued at 66 to 70 rupees at the top end of the band. It's trading at, or rather it's set to IPO at 3.7 times price to book pre-money. That's prior to the issue. That's how we're seeing this. Of course, investors will have to look for how they view Bajaj Housing from a longer term perspective.
Bajaj Finserv chairman Sanjeev Bajaj, while speaking to Vishwanath Nair of NDTV Profit, spoke on the timing of the listing. He said the business is large and diversified enough for the listing. Listen in.
It's a combination of regulatory requirements, which of course we all have to meet. It's also has equally to do with the size we have achieved in this period of time. If we were a 10,000 crore AUM business in 7 years, we would not have listed. At this kind of size, the business is large enough, diversified enough, where a listing makes a lot of sense. And of course, there is the regulatory requirement.
Sanjeev Bajaj, the chairman of Bajaj Financial Services, does not feel that a banking license is essential to grow further. Responding to NDTV Profit's queries, Bajaj pointed out that existing licenses are sufficient for the growth planned at the group's lending businesses, Bajaj Finance and Bajaj Housing Finance. Listen in.
You've built out a very strong consumer-focused business on one side. This home loan business, mortgages business is also growing on the other side. Any banking ambitions at all?
Anything that we are doing that is less than one, and we are very happy doing it with the license we have.
Sir, Sanjeev, just to add to that question, Sajit here from NDTV Profit. You're growing at 30% every year, both your businesses, finance and housing finance. Given the kind of capital requirement going forward, is that the long-term game plan that you would look at moving towards a banking license so that you have low-cost deposits coming in? And yesterday, when you were there in one of the panels with the SEBI chair, we were discussing about how movement of, housing savings is moving from banks to financial instruments, and banks are getting, it's getting difficult for banks to raise deposits. So, your thoughts on those?
Well, Bajaj Finance already has a deposit license, and that has helped us on the liability side of the business. Growth is an outcome. It's an outcome of the opportunity that the market presents and our capabilities and the capital that we are able to bring. And the last 17 years journey of Bajaj Finance has shown that. The last 7 years journey of the housing finance company has shown very strong growth. Our existing license is more than suffice for us to be able to drive whatever is a reasonable growth going forward, keeping in mind the opportunity that is there, keeping in mind the risk-reward balance, keeping in mind the capital that we are able to raise periodically to be able to sustain a reasonable amount of growth.
Premier Energies ended 15% lower after making a stellar market debut. The stock listed at a premium of 120% over its issue price. We spoke to the management on the capacity utilization and use of their IPO proceeds. Listen in.
The capacity utilizations currently are hovering around 75% to 80% for the module and the cell lines. And the capacity utilizations are going to go up a little bit more this year, considering last year was the inception of the second cell line and the second module line. And as you know, cell is a complex process and it's going to take some time to ramp up. And we are through that ramp up phase, and now we are into full production every month. And we'll be adding the 4 gigawatt from the proceeds for this thing. But apart from that, there is another 1 gigawatt of TOPCon cell line that is going to be operational early next year before the 4 gigawatt comes online.
Currently, we have 2 gigawatts of cell line and we've got 4 gigawatts of module line. So, to Sudhir's point, we're adding another 1 gigawatt of cell line this year, in this financial year. So that brings us to 3 on cell and 4 on module. And then another 4 and 4 coming in FY26 and 27. So that's the capacity roadmap in terms of our expansion.
Consolidated will be at 8 gigawatt of modules and 7 gigawatts of cells by FY26-27.
Now, in stock-specific news, Kaynes Technology gained close to 4%. They expect significant revenue to come from its semiconductor business by FY26. This comes after the government approved the company's chip-making plant worth 3,300 crore rupees in Gujarat's Sanand. Earlier today, we spoke to the management on how it will aid the company's top line in upcoming years.
See, our OSAT plant is going to be an assembly house, and it will have a test facility too. Now, we have planned a project for around 4,000 crores. We will be investing around 850 crores. So this is on the plant and machinery. Apart from that, there will be some civil works and all put together. So we are excited that government has given us the approval, and then we want to start. We feel we need a year's time for construction activity. We have acquired land. We have done our planning stage, so execution will start in a month's time. And from there, we will take for civil construction. And our first revenues should be up on the third quarter of 2026.
Bajaj Auto is the next one on our radar. The stock hit life highs yesterday after the company posted robust August sales. The domestic two-wheeler segment saw a 30% jump, while commercial vehicles exports saw 41% surge. Overall, as well, the sales grew at a very healthy rate of 16%. Now, we spoke to Rakesh Sharma of Bajaj Auto earlier today and asked him what is aiding this domestic growth and what is the outlook on sales. Listen to him.
The new CNG bike, which obviously is again not a one-off, but it is something which is a very substantive initiative into the value-conscious segment, which spans the 100 to 125cc landscape. And that has brought in incremental business. And we obviously therefore expect that as the Indian industry starts to be in the positive zone and continues to do well, we should, because of these things, continue to grow faster than what the industry is doing.
In the last decade, the Indian power sector has progressed in terms of generation capacity. That's what PK Pujari, the governing council at PowerGen India, had to say ahead of the PowerGen India and Indian Utility Week event.
During the last 10 years, the Indian power sector has made remarkable progress, not only in terms of generation capacity expansion, but also in terms of transmission capabilities. And this is also enabling the power sector to meet the growing demand. But at the same time, by meeting the demand, the power sector also has taken big strides towards resilience and clean energy transition.
At the ongoing CII Financing Summit, RBI Deputy Governor Michael Patra today morning spoke on the rising role of the private sector to fulfill the economy's financing requirements for future growth. Take a look.
In India, between 2012 and 19, the ICOR averaged 5.0. So you required 5 units of capital to produce 1 unit of output. But in the last 3 years, it has fallen to 4.0. As efficiency gains in the economy rise, the workforce gathers skills, and the economic structure acquires sophistication and technological progress, it is possible to envisage that this ICOR will range between 3.5 and 4. Accordingly, the required investment rate for a decade of high growth would be in the range of 33 to 38% of GDP per annum.
Not just the main board IPOs. SEBI has also expressed concerns on SME IPO listing process. In fact, Ashwani Bhatia, the whole-time member at SEBI, says that the regulator soon will release consultation paper on SME listing process. He also spoke about how intermediaries should avoid shortcuts. Listen in.
I'm a banker, and we were told that we should learn to say no. Perhaps this is one thing that is not being done. And here, let me talk about the ecosystem. And the ecosystem includes chartered accountants, it includes merchant bankers, and it includes exchanges. And very often, and what we have seen in the recent past, is the fact that the checks and balances are simply not there. Nobody is actually saying no to the applicants. When we were bankers, we actually many times said no to a customer. Maybe the diligence that is required of the chartered accountants, merchant bankers, and exchanges is possibly missing, and they need to do some hard work over there. Growth is very much there. We are growing very, very fast. And I mean, my old customers, I remember my days in the bank. A guy who was a transport operator is today a fleet operator. But if you try to take shortcuts, try to inflate balance sheets, I think the relationship between the intermediaries and the companies will be a very short one.
Roads Minister Nitin Gadkari has slammed companies who make roads and tunnels in hilly areas without proper inspection and study of the geography. He called them the culprits and said that the companies that make DPRs or detailed project reports are owned by retired government officials. They work from their homes without any detailed investigation. Listen in.
अभी मनाली से लेकर कुल्लू तक हमने 3-3.5 हजार करोड़ का रोड बनाया और लैंडस्लाइड्स में और बाढ़ में पूरा रोड उखड़ गया क्योंकि इधर पहाड़ उधर पहाड़, इधर रोड, बीच में रिवर और उसमें लोग बसे हुए हैं और लोगों को निकालना भी कठिन है और टेरेन ऐसा है और पूरी तरह लैंडस्लाइड्स होती है। हर साल बरसात में लैंडस्लाइड हो रही है, हर साल लोग मर रहे हैं और अभी तक हमें ऐसा लीक प्रूफ कोई सोल्यूशन नहीं मिला। इसमें शब्द नहीं यूज करना चाहिए, पर मुझे मोह होता है कि ये सबसे कल्प्रिट कोई है तो ये टीपीआर बनाने वाले में बैठे होंगे कुछ लोग, और मैं ये कल्प्रिट शब्द यूज कर रहा हूं तो आई एम सॉरी फॉर दैट, मैं क्षमा मांगता हूं। ये घर में बैठ के और बहुत से डीपीआर बनाने वाली की कंपनियां सरकारी अधिकारी रिटायर होने के बाद उन्हीं की कंपनियां होती है। और ये लोग इतना घटिया काम करते हैं कि कोई घर में बैठ के गूगल पे तैयार करते, कोई डिटेल इन्वेस्टिगेशन नहीं होता, डिटेल स्टडी नहीं होता।
After a brief discussion, the West Bengal Assembly has unanimously passed the Anti-Rape Amendment Bill titled Aparajita, Woman and Child West Bengal Criminal Laws Amendment Bill 2024, which was introduced by West Bengal government. Sparked by the Arjikar Medical College rape case, the bill aims to address widespread public concern. The bill proposes to create safer environment for women and children. It also ensures the penalties laid down in Bharatiya Nyaya Sanghita 2023 to be more stringent. Prime Minister Narendra Modi embarks on a two-nation visit to Singapore and Brunei. This makes it the first ever bilateral visit by an Indian Prime Minister. PM Modi landed in Brunei, and as a special gesture, he was welcomed by the Crown Prince. Singapore and Brunei are important partners in India's Act East policy and the Indo-Pacific vision. PM Modi will first visit Brunei and then head to Singapore. Modi expressed confidence in advancing India's historical relationship with Brunei to new heights and commemorate 40 years of diplomatic relations between the two countries. Karnataka government has declared dengue as an epidemic disease. It will impose a penalty if people violate rules. Let's go across to Pratibha for more on this.
Well, yes, this comes especially after Karnataka facing a steep rise in the dengue cases here. What has been reported so far from January to July that we are talking of is the dengue cases having crossed the 24,000 mark here, and also registered 12 deaths, and this has definitely caused the health department as well as the health ministry to rise to the occasion. OV trap baskets that have been set, and also to control the mosquito breeding ground, they have now authorized persons to levy penalties, and this could range anywhere between 500 to 1,000 rupees. We are talking of monitoring construction sites, playgrounds, schools, and other such places that could be potential breeding ground for mosquitoes. This has been one of the steps taken by the Karnataka Health Department, especially after a steep increase in the dengue cases. Where it stands right now is 24,521 with 12 deaths that have registered. And here's hoping that this notification taken by the Karnataka government would definitely put an end to the alarming rise and also take care of controlling this disease, not just dengue that we are talking of, but other related diseases as well, like malaria and others. Back to you.
Thank you for that. That's all the time we had on this edition of Profit 360. Stay tuned to NDTV Profit for more news and updates. Thank you for watching.